In the 21st century, we are drowning with stimulation. And the worst part is all these distractions are just one tap away. Ready to pull you in every time you're stressed, bored, tired. It's become easier than ever to numb yourself out. But the question is, at what cost? I was once a victim to this. Anytime I felt a negative emotion, I bombarded my brain with stimulation. And you know what? It felt good for the moment to come back home from university after a shitty day and just sedate yourself with fast food, porn, video games. But then something scary started happening. I realized that I needed more of these drugs to feel the same amount of pleasure. And as soon as this temporary pleasure faded, I started to feel worse. Living this way for years and years had made me depressed, unmotivated and tired. My grades were shitty and I felt that I was heading nowhere in life. Until one day when I had finally hit rock bottom. I was there sitting on my bed, crumbs of food all over the place, binge watching shows on Netflix and procrastinating the entire day. I looked at myself in the mirror that day and honestly I was scared of what I saw. I saw a man who was not living up to his potential and would probably spend the rest of his life living this way. From that day I knew that I had to fix my life before it was too late. For the next 6 years, I read hundreds of self-help books, watched 1,000 different podcasts on neurology and psychology, tried a bunch of different diets, supplements, and mental frameworks. And one of the key things that I learned during this journey was that there is no such thing as free pleasure. Anything that claims to offer you free pleasure is often robbing the future you of that pleasure and that motivation. And this is why a dopamine detox is so important. In this video, I'm going to tell you why a dopamine detox works, the science behind it, how to do a dopamine detox without getting bored and pulling your hair out, and how to break free from highly addictive things that you've been doing for years and years without the use of any motivation. Once I'd figured these three things out, my life flipped 180 degrees. I went from someone who had failed 3 subjects in high school to someone who was now working as a software engineer at Fortune 500 companies like Dell Technologies, AMD, Synopsys. From someone who had shitty mental health and would procrastinate all the time to someone who was now reading, working out at the gym, working on his business and training martial arts 6 days a week. And all this was possible due to dopamine detox. So let's get right into it. You know, whenever we do something really pleasurable like eating garbage food, watching pornography, or just scrolling through TikTok, then your brain releases a massive amount of dopamine. And dopamine is this neurochemical that is linked with feeling happy and motivated. But the problem is that when you experience such high amounts of dopamine for such long durations, then your brain kind of becomes desensitized to it. Which means that you require higher and higher and higher doses of dopamine to experience the same amount of pleasure. So what this does is, firstly, it makes all the regular productive activities seem boring. Like imagine scrolling through TikTok for 2 hours where you're seeing all this highly stimulating content, the highlights of people's lives, and then trying to read a book on a niche topic like the Roman Empire, a book which is just white page and black text on it. You are not going to find that book interesting anymore. Once your brain is accustomed to high doses of dopamine, you're only going to want to do the activities that give you that high. And this will further desensitize you. So this becomes a vicious cycle. Too bored to do productive things, therefore you do highly stimulating things. That makes you too bored to do productive things. This is why a dopamine detox is so necessary. A dopamine detox will stop you from bombarding your brain with excessive dopamine. And when you stop for long enough, then it allows your brain to recalibrate itself and get resensitized to regular amounts of dopamine. And once this adjustment is made, you start feeling happy, motivated, energetic. You actually feel like doing things. And even the things that previously appeared boring to you, they now seem a lot more interesting. But the truth is that doing a dopamine detox is not as simple as it sounds. Like you can't just stop doing activities that you've been doing for 10 plus years and just sit and stare at walls. That's not going to work. If you permanently want to change the way you live your life, then you need a few strategies. So what I first did was I made a list of all the things that I kind of knew were bad for me. Video games, pornography, fast food. I just listed them all down. And while I was doing this, there was a voice in my head that was justifying these behaviors. For example, it was really justifying eating fast food. I kept hearing this voice telling me, it's okay, everyone does it. It's not all that bad. Have it once or twice a week. And you're bulking, you're putting on size, it's good, you need the calories. So watch out for this voice of yours. If there's a behavior that you kind of know is not too good for you, that voice in your head, that addicted brain, is going to try and justify that behavior. Do not show any mercy, write it down on that list. What writing these things down on a piece of paper actually does is that it makes the enemy clear. Now your enemy or the things that you need to avoid is not some vague idea, physical thing that is right in front of you, and you can always refer back to it that, okay, this is what I need to avoid avoid. Because when the going gets tough and you're bored and stressed, then it's kind of easy to once again justify these ideas and be like, video games are kind of okay, it's a social event, and social media helps me connect with friends. It kind of gets easy to justify these behaviors during your hard times. But when you have them listed down and the list says bad things, then it's a lot easier to instantly be like, you know what, nah, this is listed under this bad things category, I'm not gonna do it. Once this list was prepared, I went to war against the items on this list. Like, I would literally shave off my hair just so I get that feeling that I'm a new person and I'm at war against these things. One thing that I noticed as soon as I quit these things was that I now had 4 to 5 extra hours in my day. And this free time is actually very dangerous, especially when you're trying to quit shitty habits. You know that saying, an idle mind is the devil's playground? That is so true in this case. What I did to keep this boredom away was actually fill my day with other productive habits. I was now reading, I was now studying, I was working on my business, I was good lifting weights at the gym. And don't get me wrong, it wasn't like I was reading 40 pages or working out for 2 hours on day one. No, it was something really small, just reading 2 pages a day, working out for 20 minutes indoors. Because you're going to realize that at the beginning, you're not very accustomed to doing productive things. And they might seem like too much of an obstacle if you start doing them at too high of an intensity. So make sure that you start small. Do tiny things, and they're going to eventually add on and lead to something beautiful. One way to replace all your bad habits successfully with all these new productive habits is to start living your life by a routine. When you don't live your life by a routine, you actually are kind of confused about what to do, when to do, how to do. You have like 1,000 different options to choose from. But when you have a routine which says you are supposed to do activity X at time Y, then you're crystal clear about what you should be doing. You're no longer psychologically taxing yourself from choosing among the thousands of options, debating whether this is better, that is better. All you have to do is simply now look at a sheet of paper that says you should be doing this at this time. This way you are actually going to account for all the free time that you have, and you're much more likely to do all these productive things. And at the start, remember to make the routine something fun and simple. A routine should be like the most enjoyable day that you have. So make sure that you add activities that you really enjoy doing, like let's say socializing, going for walks, meditation. It shouldn't just all be work. If it's all work, then you're probably going to get anxious and skip the routine itself. Once you successfully start doing things on the routine, then you can perhaps increase the intensity of these activities. Your workouts can go from 20 minutes to maybe 30 minutes, then maybe 45 minutes, and so on. But if you do nothing at all, and if you follow the advice of some of these popular YouTubers where they just lock themselves in a room with no digital devices and just sit and stare at the wall, you're very likely going to give up on your dopamine detox on day one, and you're going to be just bored and probably go back to these instant pleasure giving activities. Whereas I did something completely opposite. I actually got a habit tracker and I started listing down all the positive productive habits that I was doing in a day. And what I realized is that the more habits that I stacked in a day, the better I felt. It's as though adding these habits to my habit tracker gave me a good healthy dose of dopamine, knowing that I was being productive, knowing that I was heading somewhere. And this new source of dopamine gradually replaced all the negative habits that I had. And I did not feel like I was missing out on life because I was getting pleasure. And this pleasure was actually good for me long term. And when you are not starved for pleasure, then you're much less likely to slip and relapse into this negative behaviors. The second strategy that I used during my dopamine detox was to create a rule book. Now, this isn't your typical rule book that says don't eat fast food or don't scroll on social media. No, not that kind at all. The rules that were mentioned in this book were a list of behaviors that I knew that if I did these behaviors, this would lead me to relapse and pursue instant gratification. So it's basically the events that actually take place before you actually do something wrong or bad. Because in most cases, you have actually messed up far before you put that burger in your mouth. You have messed up far before you click on that adult site. And with this rule book, you are now basically tracking the actual events that lead to this failure and not the failure itself. For example, one of the behaviors that I had in this rule book was not to check my notifications the first thing in the morning, because this is what I used to previously do. I used to wake up, check my notification, respond to messages, respond to emails. And what I noticed noticed was as soon as I did that behavior, the rest of my day went to shit. My mind was too occupied with the things that were mentioned in these notifications, and I would just think about them all day and I couldn't really focus on tasks. And this led me to do shitty things, just lying on the couch, scrolling, playing video games since I couldn't focus. So my rule book did not say, hey, don't scroll, don't lie on the couch, or don't play video games. It actually said that don't wake up and check your notifications first thing in the day. Avoid the behavior that leads to the failures and not the failures themselves, because the failures are basically results of certain actions that you perform throughout the day, and just focusing on the result is not all that helpful. Focus on the actions that lead up to that result. And I had a bunch of such rules. Another rule that I had was that I am not going to pick up calls from work after 6 p.m. because the calls from work get me amped up, get me stressed up, and this destroys my sleep schedule, and the next day I wake up tired and feel like doing nothing. Another rule that I had was I'm not going to press the browse icon on Instagram, because once I press that I start doom scrolling. So all these rules made it much easier for me to stick to my dopamine detox protocol. Now during this journey I realized that there were a bunch of behaviors that I could simply quit just following the two strategies that I just mentioned. A lot of these behaviors you're going to find that are quite easy to quit with these behavioral changes that you make. However, there are certain bad habits that are highly addictive, and as soon as you try to quit them, you start getting cravings and withdrawal symptoms, and these are things such as sugar, fast food, smoking, pornography, alcohol. And even though the strategies I mentioned are going to help with this, but as soon as you quit these things, you are going to experience cravings and you're going to experience a bunch of withdrawal symptoms, because using these things for 10 plus years has modified your brain chemistry. But the good news is I found a way that you can actually quit these things without experiencing any form of cravings or withdrawal symptoms. And I know this sounds hard to believe. I'm just some guy on the internet. But hear me out. For as long as I could remember, ever since I was a little kid, I was hooked to sugar and fast food. Like, these things were my coping mechanisms. And at one point of time, my addiction got so bad that I was eating McDonald's 3 times a day. And this was a time where I got access to my mom's credit card, and this food delivery app really started becoming popular. And I cannot stress enough how many times did I actually try to stop myself from consuming fast food, but it always failed. I tried all different kind of diets, I tried all these mental gymnastics, and I started using raw motivation, started watching these motivational reels. The effect would last for maybe a day or two, but on the 4th day, if I was just bored or tired, I would just eat and break my streak. And this went on for years and years. At one point, I just given up hope. I was like, you know what? I surrender. I've accepted being fat and addicted to fast food. That is until I started fasting, which is the practice of not eating any food at all for long periods of time. And I know this sounds so counterintuitive. You're probably thinking that, bro, you couldn't even stop eating fast food and now you have just decided to give up all sort of food. I understand the skepticism. It didn't make sense to me at that point of time. What I used to do was I used to only eat 1 meal a day. Like, for the entire day, I used to fast and just drink water here and there. And then I would finally eat 1 big meal. And this sort of protocol is known as OMAD, which means 1 meal a day protocol. And a lot of people had a bunch of benefits using this protocol: weight loss, health benefits, etc. But what no one talks about is the cognitive benefits, the mental benefits that you feel while you're doing this. I had absolutely no cravings for anything. No sugar cravings, no food cravings, none whatsoever. I was like shocked at that point of time. I was like, whoa, why do I not feel like doing these behaviors that I was addicted to? It's almost like those regions of your brain which are hooked to fast food and all these other pleasurable activities, they get deactivated and you experience no cravings whatsoever. So after doing this 1 meal a day protocol for like 2-3 weeks, I discovered that I'd completely fixed my sugar and fast food addiction. Like, now when I was hungry, the first image that would come in my head was like mashed potatoes or something. Like, think about this. Do you miss cocaine? The answer is no, right? At least I hope so. That's because your brain has no memory of cocaine. It has never experienced cocaine. This is how I started feeling about fast food. It's as though my brain does not recollect what it used to taste like. It's not excited by the idea of fast food. And I believe that fasting has these effects on your brain. It increases something called neuroplasticity. That means basically your brain's ability to rewire itself. It's like a way to factory reset your brain to its initial settings. And this isn't just my individual experience or just mind games or placebo. I actually started recommending fasting to some of my friends. One of these guys was addicted to cigarettes. Like, he had been smoking a pack a day for like 10 plus years. And these were exactly his findings. As soon as he did this 1 meal a day protocol, he actually stopped craving cigarettes. Like, he was like, bro, I don't even miss it. I'm repulsed by the idea of smoking. Another client of mine who was addicted to pornography, he stated that once he was in a fasted state, he had absolutely no cravings for pornography. And this allowed him to go for like 20-30 days without seeing pornography and actually rewire his brain.